as yes, Prime Minister, welcoming the great stand he's taking against all the foreigners, you know, in relation to the EU. And then you turn into it and it's just full of bills about, you know, scroungers and all that stuff. And really, on a lot of levels, what you say gives a lie to that. I mean, one obvious point is that they always present it, you know, and Osborne talks about this thing of the net curtain syndrome, that these people who claim benefits and they're stretched out at home in luxury. I mean, you know, the first thing to say about that is actually all these people being made redundant from HMV and so on. They've suddenly been transformed, aren't they, from the strivers and hard working to the scroungers. You know, it wasn't their decision. But actually, most people on benefits, and this is increasingly true because of the way pay has been held down and because of short-time working and so on, most people on benefits actually are also working. Well, you get the worst of both worlds. And in a way, the benefits system actually acts as a subsidy for bad employers who, you know, ought to be paying a decent wage that you can live off. And that's perhaps the first thing. But the other, and it's interesting, actually, that, you know, as socialists, we have to look reality in the face. We have to be very realistic, and it's true that all that rubbish in the Daily Mail does gain an echo. There is a section of people that will believe it, although actually, it's exactly as you said, you know, when people, it's actually meet people in reality, they generally change their tune. But it is interesting on the opinion polls over the last, there's been a change just over the last month or two that shows that more people now say, I think it's about 48% or something like that, say that the benefits changes are unfair, as opposed to something like 28% that say that they're fair. So that's quite a major shift that's taken place, I think, as the realities of austerity are really biting home. But of course, we haven't really seen the half of it yet. And, you know, the proposed changes that are on, there's information on that leaflet, there's also proposed changes marked out in that leaflet. They will be really catastrophic, and the problem is that the story you've described is going to be a lot of people, actually, that are going to be facing those sort of problems. But the good thing is, you know, they're taking us for mugs, really. But it's not everyone that's going to just sit down and accept that. And I think that's what we've got to kind of prepare for, and that's what the role of the labour movement is, really, and socialists to kind of mobilise the labour movement to give an expression to that. Anger, because we've got a situation where income and pay and what wages are being held down, except for the rich, actually, who are getting better off, and they try and set us against each other, you know. And we need to discuss how we can fight back against that and you know, have a unified fight, really. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the details of the housing benefit cuts. A lot of them are there. But there was, and there's actually sort of libraries now full of research on the impact of the housing benefits cuts. But there was just an interesting thing produced by Crisis, who did a survey of their advisors, who talked to people on a sort of, you know, month-to-month basis. So it's sort of recent information. And from that, they reckoned that there are about 3/4 fewer affordable properties available to rent now. So at the same time as you have, you know, the cut in benefits, you actually have less affordable properties to rent. And about half the advisors say they've seen clients cutting back on things like food in order to pay rent and heating. And 3/4 of the advisors said that housing benefits cuts have already led to, they can see, more debt among their clients. And 9 out of 10 say that you know, they've seen the people they're advising becoming homeless. And all this is building up before the real sways of the housing benefits come in. So in effect, given that a lot of the people on housing benefit are in work, that's a massive pay cut that will be introduced for a whole section of low-paid workers. And that's why it's very important that we, like Unite, do take it up, but also that we campaign for the movement to take it up as socialists. And of course, on the other hand, at the same time as there's these changes coming through, you have people like, there's been actually material in the mainstream press about where people like IDS live, and he lives in this large mansion in the outskirts, which he inherited. And also this Freud, who's the specialist benefits minister, actually, who I see actually we've seen slightly contradictory reports. Some of them say that his home has 8 spare bedrooms, and some say that he has 11 spare bedrooms. But you know, I don't know if he's going to send a housing officer around to research that, which is, of course, what other people are going to have to snoop and look and do you really use that bedroom and so on. But of course, they're against a culture of dependency. And the lesson to all you, and I hope you know, everyone in this room should know this, you all have to go out and strive to inherit an 11-bedroom house. That's the way forward. And if you don't, you're obviously the sky. You could run through a catalogue of these sort of statistics. I think it's just worth one thing that I read that pulled out from that research actually is particularly significant because they're trying to cut benefits. They're trying to, particularly for younger people, saying that if you've got a flat and there's only one of you, why do you need a flat? Just pay for one room. And it's just a significant point that under 2% of shared rental properties are actually available to people under 35 on benefits. So, the idea is the market's going to work and you have to move out of your 1-bedroom flat and find a shared flat, except that landlords, it's not profitable for them, so there aren't the shared flats out there. So, that will be, particularly for young people, a major shock, I think. And just to get, to make, you very eloquently made the points really about the role of the Labour Party in this, which obviously some people, a lot of people, would still look to as some sort of alternative. And you can understand why they do. While the Tories in there, anything looks better. You can see why people would look to that. And we have to understand that and explain that. However, and it's true that in terms of the public view, when benefit cuts came through, they made speeches saying these are badly set out, they're unfair. Although actually when you read the details, they said we don't oppose a financial envelope. So that means that they wouldn't reverse the cuts, they're just talking about the way the cuts, are arranged. And, if you think back to the last Labour Party conference, actually Len McCluskey was slammed down because he had the temerity to make this contribution. Len McCluskey, the leader of the Unite Union, and he had the temerity to make a speech saying that Labour shouldn't oppose pay restraint. And immediately Miliband and all his spin masters said, well, that's rubbish, complete nonsense. But Liam Byrne, who's their spokesman on benefits, made a speech saying that actually a future Labour government would have to continue reducing expenditure on benefits. He wasn't slapped down. That was allowed. So when they talk, there was that one nation speech and so on. That's the reality of the one nation they mean. It's one nation for the rich. It's not, one nation for us. And so although we have to understand, perhaps particularly among Labour movement activists, that there will be people who look to Labour, I think we have to be very clear that actually they've got worse in store, not reversing it. Now, it's just worth saying a little bit about, just a bit more about the private renting sector, because I think it's important, because the underlying problem is not enough decent accommodation. Actually, a very large proportion of accommodation, when it's surveyed, is actually unsafe. High rents and actually increasing rents. There was this survey that said that over 1/3 of landlords are planning rent rises this year. So that's not showing any signs of stopping. And one of the arguments the government had is we restrict benefits, rents will go down. Absolutely no sign of that happening. And in fact, rents in London, rents rose by about 7% last year. How many people's pay went up by 7% last year? But if you step back, actually there used to be rent control in Britain. It's one of the things that Thatcher got rid of. And in fact, even in other European countries, and even in North America, in most big cities, they have rent control. And I think one of the things we should demand as an emergency step is the reintroduction of rent control at fair rent. It wasn't perfect. It's not the real solution. You need to build decent homes and so on. But that's something that could be done absolutely immediately. In fact, it doesn't even need new primary legislation, because all the legislation for the old fair rents is still on the statute. In fact, if you had a private rented flat that was fair rented in 1981 or something, it would still be, you can still go and have a rent review, and there's still people who have that job. So all the system is there. So you could instantly, really, in response to an emergency, reintroduce rent control. And everything they say about why should we, isn't it terrible to spend all this money on housing benefits? Well, in a sense, maybe it is. It goes to the landlords, of course, not to the people renting it. But there's a very simple solution, isn't there? It could be introduced as an emergency measure, reintroduce rent control. And, it is, you can say that actually, when that was introduced, the argument was, well, housing benefit will take the strain. That's what the housing minister actually said, because the Tories were attacked on that period by Labour, saying that this will be terrible, scandalous. And they said, well, no, housing benefit will pay the difference. Of course, you've had the whole period from of the Labour government, 1997 till recently, which did nothing to reverse that. But I think that's an issue we have to put back on the agenda, actually, both through Unite, and really that shows the fact it isn't on the agenda, the fact it isn't absolute headline news, and that every time a Tory minister talks about it's dreadful, all this money going on benefits, that they should say, well, okay, it's going to your friends, the landlords, but let's stop it. Let's have wage restraint. The fact that that's not being said shows the gap where a party representing working class people needs to be built. That's what it would do. And in fact, if you just think about that, we were talking about how actually, when working class people get to know a real situation, they understand it, even if they sometimes fall prey to the propaganda. Really, the reason they fall prey to the propaganda is the lack of a mass organisation putting the other side of the coin, in reality. And so there's a further programme set out in the leaflet. In this contribution, I won't spin through all that. But, surely, if you think of there is an awareness of the role of the banks, it's because the money that's gone in